Hello, I'm Jonathan Clyde, owner of the Clyde Design Group, Fine Custom Cabinetry in Oakland, and welcome to this edition of the Killen Report. I'm delighted to welcome today's guest, Mr. Michael Killen, the namesake of this program. Michael, as many of you are aware, is a great entrepreneur, activist, and a wonderful artist. So we're delighted to have you here, Michael.
Thank you, Jonathan. Good to see you again.
Thank you so much. Well, we're actually going to be picking up on a conversation that you and I began a few months ago about the artistic endeavor that you are pursuing in basically painting California's energy plan. And since the time that we last spoke, I know that there must have been and have been and are continuing to be many things going on with your project. So I'm delighted that we have this time, and it's only a half an hour, to bring our viewers up to speed on what you're doing. And just to review a little bit, what was it about this plan that made you decide to take this challenge on of painting the plan?
I would say the importance of California, the importance of California's climate plan, and the potential of what California has learned and what they have put together in this plan, how it can help other states, other countries develop their own or enrich their own climate plan. And so I decided to paint the plan. I tend to like big challenges. And since we talked last, if it was 60 days, it took me at least 35, 40 days to figure out how to cut this beast.
Got it. So when we talk about painting the plan, from your point of view, what does that mean? What's meant by painting the plan?
It's identifying key aspects of the plan that are important and then articulating them on canvas so that the imagery helps people understand the plan.
So it's interesting. To my knowledge, I don't think there are a lot of artists that are painting plans. I think that's kind of a unique thing. So talk with me from the artistic point of view about the idea of literally painting a word-based document and turning that into a piece of art.
Yeah. Now, I know you know the great Harry Cohen.
Yes.
You know, he's a grandmaster artist, and he also has said, and he's a historian, he said, I don't think anyone has ever painted a plan.
Right.
So I've had to struggle to figure out how to go about articulating the plan on maybe 5 or 6 large canvases, 15 by 6 foot canvases. The way I cut this beast, to be able to attack the challenge, was to notice that this plan has 6 sub-goals. And I have looked at each one of the goals, and then I've started to think deeply how to articulate the goal so people could understand it.
Well, I'm excited to talk a little bit later about those 6 actual specific sub-goals, as you refer to them as. So in thinking about them, what's the thought process that's used from your point in getting all of this together and making it something coherent?
The thought process is to have tried to study the plan. This is a monster. It is huge. And at some point, I decided to think about the goals and try to understand them. So the thought process is to study. Study each of the goals and other aspects of it until I started to get a feel for what that goal really was all about. And then I decided to pick one of the goals and to start painting it. And once you have the facts, let's say, it's just like if you're looking out on a landscape and you're going to paint that landscape, you look at what you have, where the trees are, where the ocean might be, where the lakes are, and then an artist will start painting them. I look for where the issues are, where the interconnectivity between the goals and the strategies, one goal and another. I look for that kind of information.
I think to the layperson, looking at a landscape and painting a landscape, having it really in front of you in something as a visual versus taking text and painting text. So how do you make that transition from text to imagery?
When you have a sense of, in this particular case, the goal, and we all know, it's good to know something about plans. You know, there's always a vision, a mission, there's goals, there's strategies for attaining the goal, and then sometimes there's also principles that you have that help govern the actions of the strategies. It's good to know all of that. Mm-hmm. You know, the structure of planning, and then to say to yourself, turn it into imagery. Find a way to connect the pieces, the elements of the goal, connect them together logically in a way, and find the imagery that helps articulate it. Mm-hmm. And I can give you one example.
Please.
I focused on recently the second goal, which is for California to reduce the amount of petroleum used in vehicles by 50%. Mm-hmm. And so now I have a few things. I have vehicles. I have realization that gasoline, oil are used today by our cars. And down the road, California wants to squeeze out the use of oil, and half of it. So I started to immediately think about a sponge with oil in it. Mm-hmm. And I started to think about the arm of the state of California grabbing that sponge and squeezing it, and out comes some of the oil into a bucket. And then I thought about what else is going to help support the state's effort to reduce petroleum by 50%. And I said, what's coming now in force is the electric car. And so I have an electric car driving into the sponge and further squeezing the sponge. So we got the hand of the state and the car coming up. The two are pushing the oil out into a beautiful red bucket.
That's interesting
Yeah.
imagery, very interesting imagery.
And then if we're thinking about the coming of the electric car, we have to think about two other things. Industry, the state, has to develop massive charging stations all over the place. Mm-hmm. Because you don't want to buy a car, electric car, and only go 120 or 200 miles. You need to be able to charge. So then I start building this web into the picture of charging stations that are coming in. And then there's the other thing that comes into mind. Those cars need electricity for recharging them. And so what the PG&Es and the other utilities of the state are thinking about, that this will be a new gigantic market for them. Mm-hmm. So now I have the electric car, I have the sponge, I have the arm of the state squeezing it, I have the chargers starting to develop in, and then over here I have a gigantic tower or transmission structure to indicate that we are going to have to use a lot of electricity to charge and recharge the cars. So that's how the imagery, and then I say to myself, well then, how will the utilities get all the electricity that they're going to need for all these cars? And then I start saying, well, they're going to be building more gas power plants in the state, and so I put some turbines in.
Right, right. Well, you know, it's such a big project, and I'm so used to your success in so many different areas. Do you ever think, because this is such a enormous undertaking, can it fail?
Could it fail? Well, only if something happens to my health can it fail. And I develop strategies to help assure success. For example, this week, I went to NASA Ames, you know, the aeronautical people, and I met with the associate director. His name is Steve Zornetzer. And I said to him, one of the other goals of the state is to double the energy savings in buildings, and that soon I will start painting that goal. And I said to him, now, as you know, your organization has built the most energy efficient building probably in the nation. You know, it's one that makes more energy. It's called sustainability based. And I said, you folks have knowledge about how to increase savings in buildings. How about making your experts available to me so that I can absorb what you folks have learned, and that'll help me make the next goal? So I'm doing this with Stanford also. I work closely with Stanford's Silicon Valley Energy Summit folks. And I just recently asked for experts on cap and trade. They're making 2 experts available. I recently said I want to do some more work, gain more knowledge about the economy of California, because what's happening in California does affect this plan. So they're calling the B School and getting me an economist who will sit down with me and answer all my questions. So I bring in a lot of organizations and people to help me.
So you really do your research, and
Yes.
above and beyond.
Above and beyond. This is not the kind of project for most artists. I have a lot of respect for all artists, but this is a project that requires gathering a lot of knowledge about things outside of art, and then figuring out how to take all of that stuff and convert it into meaningful imagery.
So you've already talked about the second of the 6 subcategories, sub-goals of the plan, the reduction of petroleum use by 50%. So let's, in our last half of the program, talk about the other 5 and see where we go with this in terms of your thought process from an artistic point. So the first one, we'll just start at the beginning, is the goal is to increase renewable electricity production to 50%.
Yes, and renewable, what that's involved in, it's an attempt to get away from the use of energy generated by coal or oil. And so it's to make more use of solar and wind, and I'd say in the case of California, gas. You know, gas is less of an emitter of greenhouse gases than oil or coal. And so I will be focused on a utility, because it's the utilities that will be using the energy coming from the solar and the wind and the gas to create electricity, more of which will be using renewable. So that will that leads me to, that's part of the imagery
Right.
that will come into play. But there's a lot of issues associated with using renewables. And for example, when the sun goes down, the solar panels stop working. And when the wind stops, the wind propellers or whatever stop, and we have some problems. And there are some things that are needed to come into play to make those sources of energy work more effectively with the utilities.
Right. And one of the other sub-goals of that is that all existing buildings double their energy as well, right?
Yes. So that's the one where I'm relying to some extent on NASA. And when I was dealing with working with NASA the other day, they informed me that they have put a plan together now that's apparently been approved by top management of NASA to basically build a future campus or a future city that will have buildings in it, new buildings in this case, that are much, much more energy efficient than all the other buildings around. And I'm going to be tapping into their knowledge. They plan to make extensive use of AI, artificial intelligence. And so NASA's come up with this vision of using artificial intelligence and some other things to create this small city. And I'm going to be working closely with them to come up with the imagery for goal number 3.
For goal 3, which then leads us into the fourth goal, which is really reducing the greenhouse gas emissions from natural and working lands as well. So,
okay, and that's very much agriculture. And I want to jump first back to the first goal for a second. I should make this point. The reason I picked vehicles first, the transportation sector, that is the biggest area now that where we need to reduce emissions, transportation. That's why I picked that particular area. And it's going to be very, very difficult for the state to attain its goal in that area. Working land is very much agriculture. And probably in that topic, it's also forestry. We are now facing a terrible situation. There's been a lot of rain at times, and then there's been great droughts. There's a lot of fuel laying down on the ground now. And this has been a bad forest fire year. Every year could be like this year from now on. The imagery comes, I see cows. I see things growing.
I see fields of green.
I see fields of green, yes.
So that's as the old song goes. So what about reducing the short-lived climate pollutants?
Okay, they're talking about methane. Methane dies quicker than carbon, but it's very, very painful. And I'm tapping now into work I have done in the past. I've looked at methane rising up from in the sea and combining with salt water to create ocean acidification. And I'm now going to extend that thinking to waste treatment plants, agriculture, and I'm probably going to keep to an idea I developed a few years ago where the methane, that's a short-lived type emission, is rising up to combine with another monster, the carbon monster, and the two are going to come together, and maybe the imagery is to boil the planet or to boil the state or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it seems like the first 5 that we've talked about really culminate in the 6th one, which is quite literally safeguarding California.
Yes, I like that one. And I at first, said to myself, it's so general, safeguard California. And then I said to myself, wait a second, that's what it's all about, safeguarding California. And I decided 2 things. One, to invite a grandmaster artist to join the project and for him to make a painting through his eyes, his mind, his experience on safeguarding California. And I decided to do something wild. If one looks at California's plan, you can see slightly under the surface there are some important thoughts, and so one of them is sustainability, resilience, adaptation, and mitigation. I'm taking those 4 thoughts, and one could say there are 4 basic tactics that underline the plan, and I'm going to make a 15 by 6 foot painting that articulates those 4 very abstract, and I think you know I've done a lot of work with the term sustainability. For NASA, I made the 24-foot painting Sustainability. And then for a Stanford event, I made Resilience of America, 24 feet. And that's where I established for myself, or maybe the rest of the world, whatever, a massive infinity sign to represent sustainability. And then chopping into sustainability led me to come up with a painting on resilience. And so I'm now looking for symbols for adaptation and mitigation.
That's terrific. And what is the time frame for the completion of this painting and these projects?
Well, I'm sort of thinking that it would be August. I will end this project in August of 2018.
Okay.
And it has something to do with, in September, California is going to have its Global Energy Summit in San Francisco. And Governor Brown is committed to helping demonstrate to the world that California's climate plan is helping our economy, in creating jobs, and helping to keep California safe. So I'm going to finish whatever I'm going to do in August, and I would expect the governor's office at some point to call and ask me to talk about making the art, which is about their plan, which helps explain their plan, available for the event.
That's great. So that's the event, which is I'm assuming an invitation-only event. Where will the general public have a chance, when this is complete, to view this and have this experience that you're providing?
Well, so far, Stanford has stepped up and has booked some of the art of this project for an all-day event they're having on June 22nd. It's the Stanford Silicon Valley Energy Summit, and this will be, I don't know, the 6th or 7th year in a row. I get the lobby, and I get, you know, we put a 24-foot painting in a lobby and another couple, and so some of the public will get to see it then. And at the same time, as you know, I make a lot of TV shows. I'm a talk show host, and I invite a lot of the experts who are helping me, subject matter experts, and I'm going to be bringing them out one after another on my TV show, and people can go to YouTube and whatever. And I'm sure before August, you know, NASA has on 2 or 3 occasions displayed my work at its facilities, and I would they'll probably take it some of my art before August. And the United States Department of Commerce also has taken my art for their big events. So, but I'm focused right now on making the art.
Right. And to that end, I think you've whet at least my appetite, and I'm sure some of our viewers as well. When do you think it's going to be possible to maybe take a look at one of these 6 as how you've interpreted?
Well, one could take a look at, I'm including my 24-foot painting Sustainability in this group, and my 24-foot Resilience of America. And I'm also including in this group George Shultz's energy and climate recommendations to the president. It fits in there. But I'm already starting to share goal number 2, which is reduce energy of the oil in the transportation sector. I'm starting to show some of the early work I'm doing in that particular area. I'm going to wrap up that painting in the next few weeks. And,
That's neat.
yeah.
That's great. Well, you obviously and always have been a gentleman of great vision, and taking on these very large projects like this. What's next? What are the next big projects that you're thinking about?
I'm not sure. Ideas come to me all the time, but as soon as I announced that I was going to interpret California's climate change plan, I started receiving information about France's climate plan. And I said to myself, well, it looks like there's some people out there interested in me when I finish California producing a series of paintings that help the world understand France's plan. So that's very much on my mind. And I think that's probably going to be next. Mm-hmm. But who knows what's going to happen? You know, I might start doing some paintings on the cyber threat of Russia to the United States and how all that stuff works. Who knows? I might take on fake news.
Right.
You know, I've had thoughts about doing the evolution of the computer and communication industry to where we are today with social media and everything. But right now, I hope the French government calls me and says, Michael, would you start working in September or October on articulating our plan?
Right. Well, we forget sometimes how large the state of California and the significance it plays on the global stage, literally. And France and California, it's very kind of similar.
They're tied for, I think, the two sixth largest economies.
5th or 6th, yes.
Of the world.
Absolutely. No, it's really quite something. Well, I certainly look forward to future conversations as you develop this and as we get closer into August and as more come to your mind. And as always, it is a great, great pleasure to have you here and to have you explain this very lofty, worthwhile piece of art that you are developing. And I really do want to thank you for sharing your time and your vision and your talents with us and our viewing audience today. Thank you, Michael Killen. I appreciate it.
As a guest, I want to thank you for the honor.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you, Jonathan.
I'm Jonathan Clyde. Thank you for watching this edition of the Killen Report.